Lily Harper was an ordinary young woman with a bright future, until one night she vanished without a trace. The only clue left behind was a strange symbol found deep in the woods. Ethan Cole, a reclusive man with a history of occult beliefs, claimed to have seen visions of her fate long before her disappearance, and he was certain she was part of a ritual that could unlock unimaginable power. But as the investigation deepened, the lines between reality and the supernatural began to blur, leaving one chilling question. Was Ethan a delusional killer, or had he truly guided Lily into something far darker than anyone could understand? It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when 24-year-old Lily Harper, a bright and ambitious woman, disappeared without a trace. She had spent the morning working at a small cafe in the quiet town of Cedar Ridge, a place where everyone knew each other, and life felt predictable. After finishing her shift, Lily met a friend for a quick chat before heading home. It was a routine she had followed countless times, and there was nothing unusual about that day. But as night fell and Lily didn't return home, the people who loved her began to grow concerned. Her family thought she had simply lost track of time, maybe staying late with friends or getting caught up in something. But as the hours ticked by with no word from her, the worry deepened. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and her car was nowhere to be found. By the next morning, the fear had settled in. Lily was missing. The small town, usually so peaceful, suddenly felt foreign and unsettling. Her parents, desperate for answers, immediately contacted the police. They weren't sure where to start. Lily had no history of running away or disappearing for long periods. There had been no strange behavior leading up to her disappearance. All the police had to go on was a missing person report and the fact that her car had been found abandoned on a remote road just outside town. It was parked near a thick stretch of forest, the kind of place locals avoided after dark due to its eerie stillness. But there was no sign of Lily, not even a trace of her footprints leading away from the car. Search teams were quickly organized, and the whole town seemed to rally together. Volunteers combed through the forest, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, hoping to find any clue that would lead them to Lily. But after days of searching, no new evidence surfaced. The mystery deepened. The police began to investigate her life more closely, hoping to uncover some piece of information that would make sense of her sudden disappearance. They spoke to her friends, co-workers, and family members, but no one could offer a clear answer. Lily had been close to everyone, always the center of attention with her infectious smile and positive energy. She had no known enemies, and her relationships seemed strong. There was no indication that she had planned to leave or that she was involved in anything dangerous. Then, just as the investigation seemed to stall, a strange lead emerged. Ethan Cole, a man who lived in a secluded cabin deep in the woods, came forward. He had been a fixture in the town for years, known for his reclusive nature and his odd reputation. Ethan had always been a bit of an outsider, a man with strange beliefs and mysterious habits. He claimed that he had seen something that night, something others might not have understood. He spoke cryptically about visions and felt sure that something unusual had happened to Lily. His words were unsettling, his tone urgent, but the police didn't know what to make of them. Ethan had been known to dabble in the occult, though no one ever took him seriously. He had spoken before about seeing spirits and receiving cryptic messages from another world. Many people dismissed him as just another eccentric, but the police could not ignore him now. His story about having witnessed something dark on the night Lily went missing raised questions. He spoke of a presence he had sensed near the area where Lily's car had been found. But his words were vague, his explanations disjointed. When asked if he had seen Lily herself, he simply shook his head. Yet there was something unsettling about his certainty. He was not afraid or confused. Instead, he seemed oddly calm, as if he knew more than he was letting on. Despite his strange demeanor, Ethan became a person of interest in the investigation. His cryptic claims were enough to push the authorities to dig deeper into his past. And that's when they began to uncover unsettling details that suggested Ethan was more than just a quirky recluse. He was someone who might hold the key to a terrifying mystery. As the investigation into Lily's disappearance progressed, the police turned their attention back to Ethan Cole, the strange recluse who had come forward with his bizarre claims. Ethan's involvement in the case seemed to be no coincidence. The more the authorities dug into his background, the more unsettling details emerged. He was known in town for his eccentricities, but few people realized just how deeply his beliefs ran. His isolated lifestyle and cryptic speech had long made him an object of suspicion, and now, it seemed, the police had no choice but to take him seriously. Ethan had always been a loner, living in a small, run-down cabin in the woods that most people avoided. His family had long since abandoned him, and his few interactions with others were limited to brief encounters at the local store or occasional conversations with those brave enough to venture near his cabin. People described him as someone who kept to himself, never revealing much about his past or his thoughts. But those who had known him said there was one constant: his fascination with the supernatural. For years, Ethan had been known to claim that he had special abilities, things that no one could explain. He often spoke about seeing visions of the future, communicating with the dead, and experiencing a connection to forces beyond the ordinary world. Some people thought he was simply mentally unstable. Others believed he was just looking for attention. But the police discovered something chilling as they examined his past. Ethan's claims were more than just ramblings of a troubled man. There were patterns, disturbing patterns that suggested a deeper, darker truth. It began when they found Ethan's journals, hundreds of pages filled with strange symbols, drawings, and writings that seemed nonsensical at first glance. At first, they appeared to be the ramblings of someone disconnected from reality, but as they went through them more thoroughly, they began to notice a theme. Many of the symbols matched those found in ancient texts related to occult practices and rituals. The more the investigators looked into the content, the more they realized that Ethan was not just writing for himself. He was documenting something he believed to be real, something that had guided his actions for years. In his journals, Ethan wrote about a cosmic plan, a mysterious and powerful force that he believed had chosen certain individuals for a higher purpose. The texts were vague, filled with coded messages, but it became clear that he felt a sense of destiny tied to these beliefs. He often mentioned chosen ones, people who were meant to undergo a transformation, and the ritualistic practices required to unlock hidden powers. Ethan's obsession with these rituals had become all-consuming in recent years, and he had even gone so far as to claim that he had witnessed the fulfillment of such a ritual in the past, an event that involved the disappearance of another young woman years ago. At first, the police were skeptical, dismissing Ethan's writings as nothing more than the delusions of a mentally disturbed man. But as they continued their investigation into Lily's case, they began to see disturbing connections. Ethan's journal entries spoke of a vision, an event he claimed would occur soon, involving a young woman who would be taken as part of a ritual to unlock hidden powers. He had been preparing for this moment for months, or perhaps longer, and as the date of Lily's disappearance drew closer, his writings grew more urgent, more desperate. The detectives grew more alarmed. Ethan had spoken about Lily before, even mentioning her by name in his journal. He wrote of her as though she were destined to play a part in something greater than herself, something far beyond the understanding of those around her. And now, with her disappearance, it seemed his vision had come true. Despite the strange nature of Ethan's beliefs, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that there was more to his involvement in Lily's case than they had initially thought. They began to suspect that Ethan might have been involved in her disappearance, perhaps playing a central role in whatever dark, twisted plan he believed was unfolding. But they were still left with one terrifying question. Was Ethan a mere witness to these supernatural events? Or was he the one pulling the strings behind Lily's vanishing act? With each passing day, the investigators became more convinced that Ethan knew something they didn't, something far darker than they could have imagined. Yet despite the mounting evidence, they still couldn't figure out whether Ethan was a delusional man caught up in his own fantasies, or if there was something far more sinister at play, something that would reveal a truth that no one could have prepared for. Weeks passed, and the investigation seemed to be at a standstill. The search for Lily continued, but as the days turned into weeks with no new leads, the pressure on the police grew. The public was becoming restless, and her family, once hopeful, were beginning to lose faith. Yet, in the midst of the uncertainty, a breakthrough arrived when a search team scouring the dense forest near where Lily's car had been found made a chilling discovery. It was an early morning when the team stumbled upon something unusual, a narrow, overgrown path that led deeper into the woods, far off the main roads. The path had clearly been untouched for some time, with vines and branches tangled over it, as if the forest itself was trying to keep the secret hidden. After following the path for a short distance, the team arrived at a hidden cave entrance, partially obscured by thick trees and moss. Inside the cave, they discovered Lily's backpack. It was lying on a large, flat rock near the entrance, carefully placed as though someone had left it there intentionally. The contents of the backpack, her wallet, some personal items, and a few notebooks, seemed undisturbed. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication of where she might have gone. But the discovery of the backpack raised more questions than answers. How had it gotten there? Why had it been placed so deliberately? The police knew they had to act quickly. They were no longer dealing with just a missing person case. This had become something far more sinister. A forensic team was called in to comb the cave for any clues that might lead to Lily's whereabouts, and a full investigation into the area began. They scoured every inch of the cave, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain her disappearance. But it wasn't until they examined the cave walls that things took a more disturbing turn. Etched into the rock was a symbol. It was not just a random marking. It was a carefully carved image, one that had been done with precision. The symbol was unlike anything the investigators had seen before, a complex combination of lines and shapes that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. When the police took photographs and sent them for analysis, they quickly realized that this symbol had a connection to something far older, something tied to occult practices and rituals. It was a discovery that left the team shaken. The symbol matched one from Ethan's journals. At first, they had thought it was just another bizarre sketch, but now they understood its significance. The more they looked into Ethan's writings, the clearer it became that the symbol was part of a larger plan, a ritual of some kind, and Lily was at the center of it. Ethan had not only been aware of the forest, but he had also been preparing for something that involved the young woman he had claimed to have seen in his visions. In their next round of questioning, the investigators brought Ethan in again, hoping that the discovery of the cave and the symbol would prompt him to speak more openly. This time, however, his demeanor was different. He wasn't defensive or cryptic, as he had been during earlier interviews. Instead, he appeared calm, almost resigned. When shown the photos of the symbol from the cave, Ethan's reaction was unsettling. He didn't flinch or seem surprised. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if everything had unfolded exactly as he had foreseen. It was then that he made his chilling statement. It was always going to happen. She was chosen, and now the ritual must be completed. The detectives were stunned. Ethan had spoken of the ritual before, but hearing him say it aloud with such certainty sent a cold shiver down their spines. They pressed him for more details, but he remained vague. He spoke of a force greater than anything they could understand, of cosmic powers that guided certain people toward their destiny. Lily, he insisted, was not a victim. She was part of something much bigger, something far beyond their grasp. The police were left in a state of confusion. They had found more evidence, but it only seemed to raise more questions. Had Ethan truly been involved in Lily's disappearance? Was he an unwilling participant in something beyond his control? Or was he manipulating the situation to fulfill his own twisted beliefs? As the investigation continued, it was clear that the lines between reality and the supernatural were blurring, and every answer seemed to lead them into deeper, darker territory. The discovery of the cave and the symbol had opened up a new dimension to the case, one that no one was prepared for. The more they delved into Ethan's world, the more it seemed like Lily's disappearance was part of a much larger and far more dangerous puzzle than they had ever imagined. The discovery of the cave and the chilling symbol carved into its walls marked a turning point in the investigation. The police were now faced with a far darker mystery than they could have imagined, one that seemed to defy all logic and reason. Ethan's cryptic statements about a ritual and cosmic forces guiding people toward their destinies began to take on a terrifying weight. Yet, no matter how unsettling the details became, the question remained: was Ethan Cole merely a confused man caught up in delusions, or was there a hidden truth to his claims that could explain Lily's disappearance? The more the investigators learned about Ethan, the more disturbing patterns emerged. It was clear now that he had been preparing for something he believed would unfold in a very specific way. His journals, filled with strange symbols, drawings, and rambling thoughts, had become a map of his warped worldview. It seemed that for years Ethan had been following a predetermined path, convinced that he had a role to play in an ancient, cosmic ritual. His writing suggested that certain individuals were destined to be part of this ritual, and Lily, in his mind, had been marked from the beginning. Ethan had mentioned her name several times in his journals, but it wasn't just the mention of Lily that caught the detective's attention. It was the way he had written about her, like she was not a person he knew, but a chosen one, someone who would serve as a key part of a ritual meant to unlock otherworldly power. Ethan had long believed that certain people were meant to transcend the human experience, to gain abilities that ordinary people couldn't fathom. He had convinced himself that Lily was one of those people, and that her disappearance was not the result of foul play, but part of a carefully orchestrated plan. As the weeks passed, the detectives grew increasingly unnerved. They dug deeper into Ethan's history, trying to understand how someone with such an unusual background could have become so obsessed with the occult. It turned out that his family had a history of mental illness, and he had spent several years in psychiatric institutions as a teenager. Ethan had always been an outsider, someone who felt disconnected from the world around him. But it was during these periods of isolation that his obsession with supernatural forces had deepened. He began to study ancient occult texts and rituals, convinced that he could tap into powers that no one else could comprehend. But the more the investigators learned about Ethan, the more they began to question whether his delusions were simply the result of a troubled mind or something far more dangerous. The connections between his beliefs and the strange events surrounding Lily's disappearance were undeniable. His claims about the ritual, the cosmic forces, and the chosen ones weren't just figments of his imagination. They seemed to align with the details of Lily's case. And as unsettling as it was, the police couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan might not be as delusional as he appeared. One night, as the investigation reached a new level of urgency, the police received an anonymous tip. A local woman claimed to have seen something strange in the woods on the night Lily had disappeared. According to her, she had been walking her dog near the edge of the forest when she had witnessed a figure standing in the distance. She described the person as tall with a dark cloak, and though she couldn't make out their face, she felt a strange presence around them, as if the air itself had thickened. She had felt compelled to leave, but something had stopped her from approaching. When the police reviewed the woman's statement, they were struck by how closely it matched the descriptions of Ethan, who was often seen wearing a long, dark coat and rarely ventured out during daylight. It was another clue that added to the mounting evidence that Ethan had been at the heart of Lily's disappearance. Yet, there was still no concrete proof of his involvement, and no one could explain the exact nature of the ritual he spoke of. As the investigation grew more tangled, one thing became increasingly clear. There was something far beyond the scope of ordinary crime happening here. Whether Ethan was a man deeply disturbed by his beliefs, or whether he was part of something far larger and more sinister, the police couldn't say. What they did know was that the answers lay hidden in the strange world that Ethan had immersed himself in. A world that few understood, but one that now seemed inextricably linked to Lily's fate. The investigation into Lily's disappearance had reached an unsettling crossroads. Despite all the evidence pointing to Ethan Cole and his increasingly bizarre claims about rituals and otherworldly powers, there was still no definitive proof that he was responsible for her vanishing. The police had followed every lead, conducted extensive searches, and painstakingly reviewed his journals and every scrap of information they could find. But as each clue only seemed to deepen the mystery, they found themselves at the mercy of an eerie and unexplainable truth. Then, in a twist no one had expected, Lily was found. It was nearly 2 months after her disappearance when a search team discovered her in a remote part of the forest, not far from the area where her car had been abandoned. She was disoriented, confused, and physically unharmed but deeply shaken. She had been hiding out in an abandoned cabin, seemingly lost in time. She didn't know how she had ended up there, or what had happened during the time she had been missing. When found, Lily had no memory of the events leading up to her disappearance. She couldn't explain why she had been drawn to that cabin, or why she had wandered so far into the wilderness. The only thing she could recall was a feeling, an overwhelming sensation that something had been guiding her, pulling her deeper into the woods. The police brought Lily in for questioning, but her answers were vague and unsettling. It was as if she was not entirely herself, as though something had shifted inside her during her absence. Her family was overjoyed to see her safe, but there was a lingering sense of dread. Lily's transformation was not immediately obvious, but those close to her began to notice something different. Her once bright demeanor had become shadowed, her eyes distant, as if she was seeing something no one else could. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Lily's reappearance was not as simple as a woman lost and found. Ethan's claims about the ritual and the cosmic forces guiding her fate had seemed outlandish at first, but Lily's condition made them seem less like delusions and more like a twisted truth. In the days that followed her return, she spoke cryptically about the ritual Ethan had mentioned, though she couldn't explain it in full. Her vague statements suggested that in some way she had become part of something far greater than herself, a force she neither understood nor wanted. When detectives visited her in the hospital, they asked about her time in the cabin, hoping she could shed more light on the mystery. She could not recall specific events, but one detail stood out. She mentioned feeling a connection to Ethan, as though their fates were intertwined. It was then that the investigators started piecing together the true horror of what had happened. Ethan hadn't taken her. He had simply been guiding her. He believed she was destined to undergo some form of transformation, one that would transcend human limitations and connect her to the unknown. In his eyes, Lily had not been the victim of a crime. She had been part of a cosmic plan. The chilling realization came when the police found a series of old photographs in Ethan's cabin. Among them were images of Lily, some taken before her disappearance and others from the days leading up to it. The photos were disturbing. They showed Lily in various states of distress, staring at the camera with wide, terrified eyes. But there was something even more unsettling about the pictures. Ethan had been there watching her from a distance all along. His obsession with her had been years in the making, and it had led him to believe that Lily was the key to unlocking powers beyond comprehension. But the most terrifying discovery came when Lily, in a moment of clarity, spoke of the other side. She described a vision of a shadowy figure, one that seemed to be guiding her toward the cabin. She didn't know who or what it was, but she felt its presence with every step. She described the figure in a way that matched some of Ethan's writings about ancient beings, entities that existed between life and death, waiting to guide the chosen toward their fate. The investigation reached its conclusion when Ethan was arrested, but the truth remained unsettlingly ambiguous. Was he a killer, manipulating events for some supernatural purpose, or was he simply a deeply disturbed man who believed that he had the power to guide others into another realm?